Thank you. Good morning and welcome everyone again. My name is Devaney Iglesias and I'm the External Affairs Manager for Manatee County. I'm happy to see so many familiar faces and actually finally be able to meet you all in person. Before we get started, I'd like to ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. On behalf of Florida Power and Light, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us for a sneak peek at the world's largest solar-powered battery. At FPL, safety is our first priority. So before we get started, I'd like to share some safety messages. First, there are no thunderstorms in today's forecast. However, should a summer storm pop up with lightning, we will ask each of you to go to your vehicles and wait out the storm before we can congregate. It's also very hot today, so please stay hydrated. And if at any point you do not feel well, please reach out to someone in an FPL polo who can further assist. Finally, in case of a medical emergency, please do not hesitate to call 911. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize some of our local leaders in attendance. Please hold all applause until the end and everyone has been recognized. From the Manatee County Board of Commissioners, we welcome Commissioner Reggie Bellamy, Commissioner Vanessa Baugh. From the City of Bradenton, we welcome Mayor Jean Brown. Additionally, we have Sydney Gruters from the Office of U.S. Congressman Greg Steube, David Sarney from the Office of U.S. Congressman Vern Buchanan, and Taylor Sanchez from the Office of U.S. Senator Marco Rubio. If there is anyone I missed, please stand and be acknowledged. In a moment, we will receive a construction update on the battery's status, and then you will be invited out to the construction site and see FPL's progress up close and personal. It's important to remember that during the tour, we will be entering an active construction zone. So after the presentation, please stay seated for some important safety messages regarding transportation and safety. Now it's my pleasure to introduce FPL's Vice President of Development, Matt Valley. Matt Valley is responsible for leading new project and program development for the company. In other words, he handles all the cool stuff. Some of the projects his team is responsible for include executing FPL's 30 by 30 plan to install 30 million solar panels by 2030, building out an electric vehicle charging program to link the major corridors in Florida, and of course, building the world's largest solar-powered battery. Prior to joining FPL, Matt received his Bachelor of Science with Merit from the U.S. Naval Academy in Systems Engineering. He went on to earn a Master's of Business Administration from Harvard Business School and served 5 years as a nuclear submarine officer in the U.S. Navy. Matt, thank you for your service. Now, please join me in welcoming Matt Valley to the stage.
Thanks, Devaney. Good to see everybody here. Thanks for coming out today. Devaney put it in her remarks, but you are getting the sneak peek at the world's largest battery. No other external audience has seen this battery yet. It's like this big reveal behind the trees over there that you're going to see. But today it's just friends and family and a few local media that are out here with us. In 3 or 4 months, when the project goes into service, we're going to have people from around the world that want to come out here and see this battery. We'll talk a little bit about what this means for clean energy. It's not just a really cool battery, but I think there's no better way to encapsulate what this means than the backdrop that I didn't realize our team had set up for us here. But behind me is the Manatee plant that has been in service for those who've been out here for decades. Those stacks are part of the landscape out here. But we are going to replace that plant that is directly behind me with 132 storage energy containers. Each the size of a school bus. They're significant size containers. But that plant will go away at some point in the future, and all that will remain are those storage containers. That is progress in a very physical and visual way. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. So we're obviously very excited about this project. I've been a part of it for 3 years now. Time really has flown this last year and a half. So we're excited that we can actually start showing it off to people. So before I get into the specifics on the battery, we wanted to put a little bit of context about what we're doing at FPL. We have been very busy over the last 18 months, particularly working on solar energy centers around the state. and I want to talk a little bit about where we're going to. So, long history here in Manatee County. I was at that event in 2016. That picture in the bottom left, some of you may have been out there as well. That's the plant that's just beyond those transmission lines over here. That's 75 megawatts, about 400 acres of solar, producing enough energy over the last 4 years each year for 15,000 homes. So that's making a real difference out here. And at the time we brought that plant in, it was the biggest plant in the state of Florida. Since we put that plant in 2016, we built 41 more, each of comparable size around the state of Florida. And that just gives you a sense of the progress. But we didn't stop there in Manatee County. Obviously, we've got the South Fork Solar Energy Center, which went into service last year, and then 2 more that are on their way soon. One thing that I always say, because a lot of my team and other teams at FPL are out here working with the local community, but for the local elected officials, we really appreciate the partnership. We cannot do this without your support, right? We need to work together to enable these projects to happen. They're so critical to our future. They help us keep the bills low, they help us keep reliability up, and they obviously help us take carbon out of the emissions mix on our system. So thank you for all your help. Manatee County clearly is one of the leaders in the state at this point for the amount of solar energy. I drove past 3 of them on the way in, not even related to this one over here. So we always put the introductory side. I don't think we quite need it for this audience, but we are finalizing the process of combining our company with Gulf Power up in Pensacola, which will now put Florida Power and Light at 5.6 million customers. We serve roughly 11 million people around the state, 43 counties now, which is about 2/3 of them. And from Miami to Pensacola, it's pretty large territory that we cover, and we have a lot going on in most of those counties. So this is the metric that we kind of measure ourselves by, right? It's very simple. It's clean, it's reliable, and it's affordable, right? We kind of measure ourselves against those 3 things. And as I'll talk a little bit about, you'll get a sense for not just a track record over the last couple years, but over the last couple decades, right? And I'll demonstrate that with what we've done, particularly in emissions. But on clean, we're way below the national average. With all the solar that we're putting in, we're going to continue to be lower than the national average and pulling away from many other utilities. We didn't get there because of policy in the state of Florida directing us to do that. We did that, we think, with partnership with local communities, the state government, and smart decisions made over a number of years, sometimes when they were not popular, right? Particularly 20 years ago when we started to get off of oil. Second thing is in reliability. Obviously, most importantly, you want your lights to turn on when you flip the switch. We totally get it. We're in storm season right now. As we take down this tent later today, we have teams that are mobilizing just in case Fred intensifies a little bit or veers to the right. We are very ready. It is part of our DNA at FPL to be ready to support during events like this. And then last one is affordable. We're hopefully finalizing our every 4 or 5 year rate case with the Public Service Commission right now. Many of you we've reached out to and talked a little bit about that. We announced a settlement a few days ago. Settlement's not done. Settlement still has to go in front of the commission. But what it means is we can continue to make investments on the system, but also we can continue to keep the bills low while also taking carbon out of the system over time. We think it's a win-win for customers. We hope that the Public Service Commission supports that. So in terms of our goals, we've set some pretty audacious goals at FPL in terms of where we want to get to on clean energy. See, you may have heard 30 by 30. It's not the ESPN 3430, it's 30 by 30. We have translated megawatts so that the average 6th grader can understand in our state that we mean 30 million solar panels, each one of them about 6 feet by 3 feet, installed in the system by the year 2030. So far, we have put 40% of those panels in since this Manatee plant went into service. And just to give you a sense of how many panels that is, 40% of 30 million, 12 million panels would wrap from here almost all the way around the Earth back again since that Manatee plant went in. And again, many of you were there. You know we've been busy all over the state, not stopping, and in good FPL fashion, there's even more to come in the next couple of years. So that is where we're heading. That is part of what we have communicated both to the Public Service Commission in our 10-year plans. Why are we doing that? First off, it's economical. Every time we put one of these solar plants in, it saves money on the system, right? We don't have to burn fuel in plants like this. Instead, we let the sun rise in the morning, we generate electricity. There's very little operation and maintenance cost and zero fuel costs for facilities like that. I think it's the way of the future for most utilities. We've gotten a jump start on it. Our system is in very good shape to be able to put a lot of solar on very quickly. But as we're going to talk more about, you're going to need a battery because the sun doesn't shine at night, and I'm pretty sure all of you have lights on at night and need energy then too. So in addition to all the solar news that we've talked about, we're also very proud of the fact that we not only retired the last coal plant in the state of Florida that we own or operate, but we blew up the stacks to emphatically say we are done with coal at FPL in Florida. There are other coal units in other parts of Florida. There's other coal obviously around in the country. Why do we do this? Same reason we do in the solar. This is not economic, right? And as we look at these plants, older plants require a lot of maintenance over time. It's not economic to keep them running, and obviously it's generating an enormous amount of CO2 on the system. So this is, I think about this page, you know, a lot of us are very proud of it because this is the generational handoff, okay? 25 years between the left pie graph and the right pie graph, really, right? And we're obviously sitting pretty close to the numbers in 2020 right now. But you can see in 2005, we burned 17%, or 17% of all the energy we generated in 2005, 2005 came from oil, right? We bought more oil at FPL in some of those early 2000 years than almost anyone else in America. And we were sending those dollars overseas to countries that didn't always like us, right? And then you can see the wedge on there from coal. The other wedge that says other power sources is really buying from neighbors in the state and other places that had coal generating units. So that's also effectively dirty power. There's no solar on there. We of course had the nuclear units, and then gas at that time was beginning to displace some of the oil and the coal. If you fast forward to today, in the middle graph, you can see coal's gone, oil's gone. We only keep oil in the system in case we have an emergency and we can't get natural gas, so we can still run these units, but otherwise we don't burn any oil or diesel. You can see solar emerging. Despite all that progress I told you we've made, it is a gigantic system, and it takes a long time to move half of the state or 60% of the state of Florida. And we still have the wedge with nuclear in there. If you jump forward 10 more years, now we're up to 40% of all the energy in 2030 will be carbon-free, right? And obviously on certain sunny days, that percentage of energy might be even higher. That's kind of an average through the year. The rest of that wedge, that gas fleet, is a very efficient gas fleet, very low carbon, and over time, we're beginning to experiment with green hydrogen. We could be running green hydrogen through those facilities instead of natural gas and further take out emissions. So you think about the system that some folks, you know, on our staff inherited in 2005, and then the system that they hand over in 2030, that's a dramatically different system, right, for their children to kind of pick up and then take it from there, take the baton and go the rest of the way. So turning quick to batteries, not a lot of magic. You probably all have batteries in your pockets with your cell phone. The chemistry you're going to see is roughly the same out at the battery project out here. So effectively, you know, when you start putting more solar on the system, solar is going to generate when the sun is out. Solar doesn't generate when there's rain or other clouds that tend to pop up in the afternoon. And obviously, you're going to get no production at night. Big question for a lot of utilities, how do you shift that energy to when it's needed? You need battery storage. You can see with a simple graphic that we can divert the energy into storage and then bank that for later. Later could be at night, later could be 2 days from now, it just depends. And as we put more storage on the system, we'll have more reservoirs to store the energy, which is kind of an amazing concept because for almost 100 years, every utility would instantaneously produce all the energy required, and it would be instantaneously consumed in other parts of the system. Think about that balancing act that has been going on. And finally, at scale, with this project and a few others, we're starting to bank energy for later. And then you can see once it hits the grid, the lighter blue, that's us in Florida. So it goes all throughout the Florida grid. So we thought we'd throw this in just to highlight. You'll hear more about our EV program, but there is if you haven't heard, a major revolution going on in the transportation sector. It's related to batteries too. FPL is doing a lot to play our part and kind of figure out exactly long-term how we support the electrification of the transportation sector. So one way that we're doing that is over in West Palm Beach. We are underway in this pilot, this rendering, like the battery renderings will be turned into a real project soon. But the idea here is we're taking solar, battery storage out on a site much smaller than we're going to see today, and we're going to capture that. Even if the grid was out, we can still generate and fill the tanks of the batteries. And then also have these trailers that have batteries and EV fast chargers connected to them. So now we can move these trailers around the state. Imagine a local grid outage or an evacuation of a certain area for a storm. We can move these trailers, pre-position them, drivers can come up, charge their car, and then continue on. So I want to talk a little bit about, this kind of builds to the Manatee battery here, just where we've been with battery storage. So I mentioned 3 years ago, but in March 2018, we did at FPL kind of our first battery storage projects of scale. One was down south in Charlotte, the other one, Citrus, was our site in DeSoto County. And those were two different ways to connect the battery into the site. Today what you're going to see is a battery that we call AC connected, which is basically at the substation behind me. The battery goes directly into the substation, right? So it's standalone. It plugs into the same point that the solar is plugging into the grid. The other way you can do that is you put batteries out into the fields where the inverters are taking the energy from the panels and converting that from DC to AC and stepping up the voltage. So two different ways to do that. Then in December of 19, we put the Wynwood battery in, which was a battery in a building, about 1/10 the size of the battery today, but that's in downtown Miami because we need to get batteries into urban areas too. Then in August, at a power plant at Dania Beach that's in Fort Lauderdale, we deployed a battery, again, about 1/10 the size you're going to see today. And the purpose of that battery is to support the startup of the units out there if the grid was down. These plants need energy to start. So if the grid was out in the area, those batteries give it that initial boost, get those plants turning up, and then you turn on other parts of the system. And then we've done a few other batteries as microgrids, as I've talked about. One down in Miami, partnership with FIU, a microgrid to hold the engineering campus, but same concept of solar plus storage backing up that campus. All of those battery projects at FPL have led us to Manatee, right? Those were experiments, those were pilots. But the architecture, the thinking behind how we did those is the same for what we used out here today. So we talk about, we knew we had to put this page in, we talk about the largest battery systems in the world. Tesla made the early news a couple years ago with a project in Australia. You've had two other projects in California. You might have heard California has had a lot of reliability issues. California's had a number of cascading issues. So these batteries were in response on their system a couple years ahead of us. They're just now coming into service to support grid reliability. And then you see Manatee coming in at 409 megawatts as the largest battery in the world. We are going to claim this right now. Somebody will jump ahead of us, I'm sure, in 6 months, and we'll no longer be able to say this, but you better believe we're going to say it when it's true. Manatee County will have the largest battery in the world when it goes into service, and you guys are going to see that today. We need no construction delays to the construction team, though. So some stats on the battery itself. It's gigantic. It's 40 acres out there that we've laid out the battery. When we did the case for retiring this plant, building the battery, we did other solar on the system. We came up with savings numbers of over $50 million of savings over time, so we don't have to run this plant for customers. 1 million tons of CO2. And then if you do some quick conversions, because megawatts and megawatt hours are just non-intuitive for most people. So, you think about megawatts as how much energy can you push into the grid at any one instant, right? And so on Manatee, that's 409 megawatts, which is a lot. And it's, many times more than this solar plant over here at full production. The other thing, the other way you can talk about it is using megawatt hours. And so Manatee battery is 900 megawatt hours. And there, we've come up with a lot of different comparisons, like it can power 329,000 homes for 2 hours. There are 200,000 homes in Manatee County, so this battery could power every home in Manatee County, every home in DeSoto County, and probably a few others for several hours on a given day if needed. Also, everybody's got an iPhone. We divided them by the average iPhone. It's 100 million iPhones worth of batteries. And if you're wondering how many iPhones are running around in the US, it's about 100 million iPhones in people's pockets right now around the country. That just gives you a sense of the scale of this project. Even though it is very dense, as we talked about, much smaller footprint effectively than this, a lot of energy can be stored out there. And these are just some of the pictures. We'll get into this a little bit in the tour, but the big box, if you look at the top right picture, the top right box is the battery itself. So that's where the energy is stored. Then the inverter, the transformer is in that box to the left of it, right? So we'll open up a cabinet for those that are out there. I think we're going to be able to do that and show you. Not all the batteries are in today. I think the first batteries are starting to get installed, but all of the equipment, electrical equipment is in place and ready to go. The batteries will be installed at breakneck pace between now and the end of the year to be ready to put this project into service. And then just a couple time-lapse photos. This goes quickly. You can see in February it was an empty field with a lot of big trucks rolling around out there. By April we had laid the pads down. We had some of the transmission poles. And in May you can see it really starting to take shape as some of the first containers arrived and we were starting to connect up the equipment. And this gives you a sense, one last point about batteries, they're really heavy. So this is just the containers coming in by these trailers. They get pulled in, you've got a crane that lifts them up, drops them down. That's before any of the batteries go into it. If you go back to that EV charging trailer that we had, the reason we can't make it bigger is it would exceed weight limits on the highways. So we've got to kind of keep it to that size. But Manatee has come in piece by piece over time because of its significant weight. And as I said, it's 75% complete. When you go out there, and I think we're going to do the tours in different ways, Devney's going to talk a little bit about it, 132 containers, right, where the batteries are stored, and then 132 of that inverter transformer boxes that are next to it, laid out amongst that 40 acres. You can see we're making good progress on setting about 75% of all those in place, but you'll get a good sense today of what this looks like. And if we've got any batteries in, we'll be able to open that up and show you the cabinets. Yes, we wanted to have a battery module actually here. They're about the size of the podium. They're 450 pounds. We couldn't get anybody on our team to lift it, to drag it over here, so you may see some of them over there getting installed. And that's it. We didn't want to take too much time. I know it's a little bit hot out here, but again, thank you for the partnership in the county. We're super excited to show everybody. You are the first people who are getting a chance to see this, so we hope you're excited. We hope you're proud of this project, because you cannot run a grid on intermittent resources without battery storage and likely even green hydrogen further in the future. So this is really a key ingredient to getting where we know we're all going to have to go at some point. So thank you for your time today. Hope you enjoy the tour.